But are things different when it comes to a sports team, when it comes to a locker room? There's so many other elements at play other than just losing a friend. Judd Zulgad of SKOR North is here joining us to talk about how teams attack some of those differences and how they provide support to help inside the building. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by Tyler Forness, publisher at The Sporting News, contributor on SKOR North's Purple Daily, publisher of Substack Run In Shooter, the host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness. With me, as always, this time in the bottom right corner is producer Dave, and to my left, sports dad himself. He is SKOR North's Judd Zulgad. Judd, thanks for joining me tonight.
You're welcome. Sad topic, but it's an important one to talk about.
Absolutely, and that's why I wanted to have the conversation, because we've all lost somebody. You just a few weeks ago lost your brother-in-law, if I remember correctly. And we all have to deal with death. We all have to deal with it in a different way. But there are interesting dynamics at play when it comes to dealing with it in a professional context, especially one as tight-knit as a professional sports locker room. And I kind of want to start the conversation here, because we're not going to talk about the cornerback position. We're not going to have that conversation. It's not time for that. That will come. That will come probably early next week, because we want to make sure we have it before the start of training camp. But kind of big picture, Judd, you have been covering sports in this town since the 90s. And you've seen Korey Stringer. You've seen Malik Sealy. You've seen Tony Sparano. You've seen Jeff Gladney, which is kind of a unique one because he wasn't on the team, but he was still very connected. And then there's also an executive when you were covering the Green Bay Packers that passed away. When you kind of look at some of these things from your own perspective as a journalist, what are some of the things that we don't necessarily think about when it comes to these events because of the world that professional sports is?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to unpack here. But I think the most important one is, or among the most important ones now, is how a team deals with this. Because especially in football, like all professional sports are incredibly unique unto their jobs, right? Like we like to compare it to a normal job, but it's not. But football, to me, and death, it's a really tough one, because you are looking at a bunch of guys who, when the season starts, young men, and the majority of these people are in their 20s, who you literally suspend your belief. Like, you're playing a game that within itself is incredibly violent and dangerous, okay? And to lose a colleague, to lose a friend, to lose a teammate who's 24, which is probably, very close to the age of a ton of these guys. And Khyree Jackson was in the locker room during minicamp, during OTAs. JJ McCarthy posted the picture that they took together, and now he's suddenly gone and literally ripped away from their lives. It's not normal. It's not a normal, if you work with a colleague and they die, it's tragic. I'm not trying to downplay it, but you don't go to work suspending your belief that death is a damn near impossibility. Football players and young men do. And so I think that there's a conversation to be had here on how this gets processed. And the fact that you can't, Kevin O'Connell, the day that the Vikings report to camp, can't just say a few words, right? Like, there's not magic words to make this go away or to make it better. There is a grieving process. There is a process of, I'm sure, second guessing things. Things like this can impact a team for a long time, and to say it shouldn't is ridiculous. But I've seen this before, and football and pro sports is so focused on one thing, and that is the preparation and trying to win games, that when life gets in the way in any way, it can be difficult, much less death. So it's a very
Mhm.
important discussion. But you know, I think personally, guys, when a guy gets hurt, right? Like let's say a guy blows out his knee or something. That can be a rallying cry, right? Let's win this for so and so. And that doesn't mean that the person's not missed, but the guy's still there, he's working out. It can be a let's do this. I don't think death is the same thing. I don't, I've seen like they're going to devote the season to Khyree, and that's a really nice thought. And I'm sure that they
Mhm.
will in their own way, but it's not a rallying thing where it's just like as simple as let's turn a page. That's impossible. So there is a lot to unpack here. And to be honest, when the players reconvene, that unpacking is just going to be getting started. And there is, in my
Mhm.
opinion, no way around it. And we're going to have to give them a lot of grace here, because when you're their age, I don't care what you do, you don't think about death. But when you're their age and do what they do, I think it's really hard to get your head around what they are going to go through and, quite frankly, what they're going through right now, Forno.
So one of the things I kind of want to talk about with this context is I don't know if you remember this, but I'll never forget I was in a Ramada back in '97 when the Jets played at the Detroit Lions week 17 of the '97 season. And if you don't remember the game, that was the game that Barry Sanders broke 2,000 yards. Earlier in the game, linebacker Reggie Brown died on the field, and they ended up resuscitating him, and he had a broken neck, and he never played football again, but he was able to walk and live a full life. And I'll never forget kind of watching that. And, as a 7-year-old kid, you don't really understand what's going on, but kind of looking back at it, how they ended up playing a game after that to me was just shocking. And I know it's a completely different thing to lose somebody outside of the world of football that happens to also be in your world, because a car accident is not on the football field. But they were
Sure.
able to do that, and not only do that, but Barry Sanders broke 2,000 yards, and it ended up being this moment of jubilee for the entire city amidst that tragedy. And one of the questions I have for you, Judd, in your experience covering professional sports, is there going to be a different context because it happened in the normal world as far as how some of these players will process it? Because it, you mentioned that you don't think about death. Well, in a sport as violent as football, you kind of can't, because if you're
Right.
thinking about it, that's that's an incredible thing in a negative connotation, because one hit can completely change your life.
Mhm. Um, no, I don't. I don't think that the players. I don't think because this took place in a tragic car accident. I don't think that that's going to change a thing, because it's still their friend and a guy that they
Mhm.
played with, and again, a guy that I think you look at what happened, and we've all seen stories like this before, and we don't. Just to be absolutely clear, Khyree Jackson was not driving. He was in the passenger seat of the car that was basically destroyed. Three people
Mhm.
died. It's being investigated for drinking, and especially the person that was driving the car that collided. But like we don't know details. But all of that being said, I think as far as the players on the Vikings go, I don't think that this makes that different. I think that this still is incredibly. They're going to show up for camp, and they're going to have to address this, and then they're going to go into a room where Khyree Jackson was a month and a half ago, and now he's gone and he's never coming back. So no, I don't think it changes things. I think it's still just as tough. um I think when you're that age, anything to do with death that involves a person who is of similar age, Forno, is incredibly difficult to process. So I don't,
Mhm.
um not to be callous, I don't think it matters how you die. I think the key is he is just now gone, ripped away. And I think that's going to be incredibly hard to and take time to process that.
Yeah.
Um, the tragedy of a guy, potentially dying on the field, which the Bills had now, what, two seasons
Last
ago,
year.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, with DeMar Hamlin. That's a whole different thing and incredibly difficult. I think whatever it is, though, when it involves death like this, I think it's incredibly taxing. And again, I'll go back to what I said, which is a professional sports team. If you think about it, ideally, their focus is on one thing: winning games. When I started to cover the Packers in '03, and I spent 2 years doing the Packers for the Star Tribune before I switched to the Vikings. And I remember talking to my wife about the schedule at the time. And I had been in the sports department at the Strib and done freelance work, but I hadn't at that point covered a pro beat full time. And she's like, well, they'll have Thanksgiving and Christmas off, right? And I said, no. I said, when the season starts, there's no time off. They don't take time off. They don't go by anyone's schedule. They don't care. All they care about is, like, and I'm not saying that they might not have a shorter day here and
Mhm.
there, but there's no 2-week vacation. They are, when the season starts, this is what you do. And I think preferably in a very harsh world, the preference is this is all you think about, right? And I mean, I've seen guys, and I don't blame them, but a guy's wife is pregnant. That's a pressing thing. We have seen guys play affected by that. I don't blame them, but it's not what the team wants. We have seen parents be sick. We have seen players affected by that. And so now imagine that this player who was just there, who's 24, is just
Mhm.
gone. And but they're still trying to say, we need you to focus on this game. And the really, really weird thing that get the curveball here to me is this. If you think about when something major happens in your life, and again, we live a sort of day-to-day existence where we can get distracted. And, especially when you're young, when tragedy strikes, right, guys? The thought comes up, what's this all about? Like, what's this like us? We love sports, right? But there have been times where you're like, I love sports, but it's really like in the bigger picture of seeing a loved one pass away, for instance.
Mhm.
I talk about sports. Who cares about that? Well, now imagine playing and that's your thought. Like that's and Tyler, you're right. Like you can't think like that because that's when you let your guard down and maybe get hurt. So like there is just so many tentacles to a tragedy like this that I think that we don't think about because we think, well, I mean, yeah, they're guys who play football, but the commitment that takes ultimately and
Mhm.
the amount of focus that takes is so high that I mean, O'Connell, this is going to be his toughest assignment. And that call that I'm sure he got at some point on Saturday is the absolute nightmare phone call. Because, it's bad enough when a guy gets arrested or something happens, but the nightmare is this. And now O'Connell and the Vikings are basically responsible for 90 young men who are going to be, a lot of whom are going to be searching for a why, and there really isn't a why.
And that's the difficult part, just in from a human element, and not even just with the team, but having to move forward as a team makes it a little bit different than what we would deal with in our everyday lives. And I do agree that I think this is going to be the hardest test for Kevin O'Connell. I At some point, I think I'm going to try and get in touch with Mike Tice because I think having a conversation about what they did when Korey Stringer passed away, I think would be a really good example on some of these things. But Judd, you've also seen some of this firsthand, having been on the beat and covered teams in this town forever. What kind of things are teams going to do? What are the Vikings going to do to help out everybody in the building that are things that maybe we don't necessarily think about?
Well, I saw immediately it looked like upon the news arriving, the tragic news, that they did offer counseling. Now, I don't know if a lot of young guys will take that. They should.
Mhm.
But at that age, you're like, I'll be fine. And then, it hits you like a ton of bricks in 3 weeks or 3 months. And I think the difference between the Stringer thing was, just as a society in 2001-ish, we didn't handle, or we didn't have the knowledge now that we do have. Like, I don't know if the Vikings in 2001 brought in counselors. I don't think that they did. Like, they got together as a team, and that's
Mhm.
nice. But I do think that there is a lot more help now. O'Connell is certainly a guy that understands. Like, I feel like he is far more wired to this than the old school traditional football coach. So, like, I think that the Vikings will do everything that they can possibly do internally to help, as far as like counseling goes, as far as
Mhm.
not trying, I think in the old days, I think we tried to bury this, right? Like, don't talk about it. It's over, at some point in time. Well, that's not the best thing. The best thing is to probably talk about it until you at least feel that your feelings have been heard. And I'm
Mhm.
spitballing here, but we definitely know more now. But I think that that's from a starting point where things will begin. The thing is, you can't know where it's going to end because, different people are going to handle this in different ways. It's not like it's going to be, okay, we're going to be sad about this and talk about it for 3 weeks and then it's done, right? I'm sure
Yeah.
that some guys will probably not get past it, but be okay enough with things in 2 weeks. And some guys, it's probably going to be 2 months. And that's where it's
Mhm.
all a very, what's the word I'm looking for here? The term slippery slope, because how everyone feels about this is important. And that has nothing to do with the actual season itself. I'm not even talking about wins and losses, being on the same page to
Mhm.
play. I'm talking about as a group that has to function together on a daily basis and how that's going to look.
Yeah, and what I'm also curious about is we have a few members of the Vikings organization, most notably ownership, Rob Brzezinski, and then even a couple players like Harrison Smith and Brian O'Neill was there during his rookie year in 2018 when Tony Sparano passed away. And
Yep.
how valuable is it going to be? It's not something you ever want to have experience with, but how valuable is it going to be for those individuals having been there before to help some of these young players and coaches who have never had this type of experience?
I think that'll help some, but the problem is that, all of these situations are different. And Sparano was, and I remember because I believe he died on the Sunday. Was it the Sunday morning after camp had started?
I think so.
Or the Sunday before. But I mean, it was right there. And I thought to myself the same thing, which is teams don't just get past this. And in that case, Zimmer was very impacted because Sparano had just had some chest pains, gone to the doctor. They said, you're fine. And, Mike and Tony were incredibly close there. And like that, from the top on down, he didn't get past that. He was mad. He would be, 2 years after that, making comments about how the doctors didn't take care of it, blah, blah, blah. But in that case, as far as the players go, they were definitely impacted, especially the offensive linemen were impacted.
Mhm.
But that was also a guy who was more skewed towards like my age. I think he was what, pushing 60. And it's sad, but I mean, this is a
Yeah.
24-year-old football player kid. So like this one to me, it's hard because they're different circumstances. They both are very emotional, but I mean, we're talking about a kid whose life was just starting.
Yeah, and it was really hard to process. And when I called you on Saturday trying to
Yeah.
get to the bottom of it, I didn't want to believe it, and I
Yeah.
still don't. But it's kind of one of those factors. Kind of wrap things up here, Judd, because we're grateful for your time here. How do the Vikings start that healing process? How do they go about getting together at training camp? Will the NFL allow them to maybe get together a day early to try and get some of this maybe not out of their system, but
Mhm.
have like an open forum, like a large team meeting to try and almost like a vigil, because I know when I've had a couple of my friends pass away,
Yep.
we've gotten together like the day before the funeral and just sat and swapped stories and almost like a time of remembrance. Will they have anything along those lines to try and help jumpstart that healing process?
They very well might. Now, the schedule, the way that the schedule breaks down actually works pretty well for that, because they're due to report on the rookies are due to report on Sunday, the 21st. And I would say that they need to be addressed separately, because I mean, these are people who were
Hmm.
drafted with them, right? These are the youngest of the young. And then the veterans come in on the 23rd. And so my guess is that O'Connell will probably address the rookies. Now the question becomes, do you address the football stuff at that time? And he might not. Like, he might wait. If they were going to start with some on the field rookie work on Monday, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes a piece of that day for the football talk and like what we're going to
Yeah.
do, and spends the entire day with them on Sunday talking about this. And the veterans, I think, then when they come in on the 23rd, will probably be talked to as well. But just thinking back as a kid, the rookie class is going to be the one that's probably the most shaken, just as far
Hmm.
as, they're going to walk into a room in which this kid's locker was right there, and it might still be there and he's gone. So, but I do sense that O'Connell will be, not to sound crude, I sense he is the type of guy who will be up to the task, though, of handling this correctly. Like, I don't think you're going to get old school again. I'll go back. Coaches didn't know what to do, and they basically wanted you to, get past it. That's just not possible, nor should that be asked. So I
Hmm.
think O'Connell and Kwesi will do as good a job as you possibly can, because you can't do a perfect job of addressing the team and uh, allowing for time for them to heal, in the sense that they're going to understand that on a case by case basis, different people are going to be impacted differently. I'll never forget when Gladney died, and to your point, he was gone. I think
Hmm.
because he signed with the Cardinals, got in the car accident in Dallas, I believe, and that was
Hmm.
a year after being let go by the Vikings. And I'll never forget the impact that I felt that had on Cam Dantzler, who was very tight with Jeff. Um, I don't know that Dantzler ever fully mentally got past that.
Hmm.
It just felt like that. It just felt like he was already up against it. Like, he was not doing great. And I always felt like whatever happened after Jeff died, that Cam never fully, and again, mentally got past it. And that's the most important thing here. Like, we're talking mentally, like we're talking your buddy. In Cam's case, I think that they were damn near best friends. And it was hard to watch. Like, it was impossible not to feel empathy, because you think back to yourself being that age, and what your friends meant to you back then, and the dumb stuff that we all did, the chances that we
Yeah.
all took. The thing with this, to me, with Jackson, is there, but for the grace of God, go a lot of us, you know,
Yeah.
like you tell me the time that when you were his age, you did nothing dumb. And here he's going to play in the National Football League. It's been his dream. This kid was at a Chipotle a couple of years ago, and at a grocery store, trying to get through life, decided to go back to football. You feel like you're on top of the world, and in a split second, it's all gone. It's just really, really so sad, Tyler.
It's incredibly sad, and I implore everybody else, even if like the people in the building knew him and his friends knew him, but as fans of the team, you can still be impacted by it. If you feel like
Yeah.
this has impacted you in any way, don't be afraid to seek help or talk to somebody about it, because
Mhm.
it's like I remember when Corey Stringer died, and that was hard on me. I referenced the Reggie Brown thing, that memory of being in that hotel room watching that happen, and the ambulance coming onto the field and not really being able to grasp it. That's still stuck with me since. And it's been 27 years.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, in the 80s, growing up a North Stars fan. Okay. I was probably around, I don't know, 15-ish. The Flyers had a goaltender who was really good, Pelle Lindbergh, who got in. He wrapped his car tragically around the pole and died in Philly after a game one night. And I mean, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'll never forget that. And the Stringer death and this, for me personally, it's just this feeling in the pit of your stomach of, oh my God, like there's no way that you're not moved.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you're exactly right. Fans, media, I don't care whom. Death is not a torn ACL, right? We're used to dealing with setbacks, not tragedies. And so I'm totally with you. If you're impacted, don't bury it. Talk to people about it, because there is no shame. There's no shame in feeling empathy and really sorrow about something like this. Zero shame in that.
Mm-hmm. Dave, before we take off here tonight, do you have anything for Judd? Anything that you want to ask?
Well, first off, I want to point out there are a lot of veterans that are watching this show and in the chat right now that have been there since Gulf War through Iraq and Afghanistan. We see people of that age, they've been our troops, that they think they're invincible at that age. That's normal. That's normal psyche. And when you lose them, it's hard. And that loss never goes away. Does it get easier over time? A little bit. But do you ever forget them? No. At least I haven't. And I'm sure everybody in the chat could express that too. You don't forget them. How you deal with them may be in various ways. We tend to get, very strange senses of humor because of death. But if you need help, seek help. Talk to somebody. That always helps. Now, I do hope that I think the Vikings are doing well. They're bringing in counselors. I do hope they have. Judd, I hope you report on that they have some sort of ceremony when the players get back together, just to remember them, because that will help. That will be a start, and it could be something simple, and it could be something the public doesn't see. Just it happened at this time on such and such. It was in the locker room or someplace else. Mm-hmm. But I hope that you get to report on that, because that is, I know for us in the military, when we lose somebody, it's that little bit of ceremony that helps the rest of us.
Sure.
So.
Absolutely.
I hope you get a chance to report on it. And if Tyler gets credentials, then he does.
Yeah, and my guess is that they will do something privately, but I wouldn't be surprised if they then acknowledge it, something like that. But yeah, you're right. Like, there needs to be, I mean, hell, what a grieving process. Eventually, closure of some sort, although it's not completely closed. You know what I mean? So yes, I think, but I do. The one thing is, I do think the Vikings are very well positioned to do right by the situation as much as you possibly can. I have confidence that, that with the people that run this team now, that they will do things like that they are trying to help guys. I just hope the players aren't too prideful not to take the help.
I agree. And this applies to anybody. I see in the remarks that people are saying, hey, there's civilians too. Yes, everybody.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're all Vikings fans. It hit us like a ton of bricks when we all learned the news. And it's it's a shame. It's, and it shows the fragility of life.
Yes.
And it was nothing he was doing wrong. He was just the passenger. And it was just circumstances. So it's hard. But just like I said, if you need help, get help, like Tyler said. And Judd, thank you for coming on and sharing your experiences through, whether it be early when it was with Korey Stringer or with Tony Sparano. All this affects, or even last spring with Bud Grant. There was people affected in the building over that. So,
Oh, of course. Of course. And at least in Bud's case, though, it's such a great life.
and it was a celebration of life. And you
Exactly.
expected
Exactly.
it, because
But
he was
you
up there in age. It's something different when you're 24.
Yeah. Just terrible. Just terrible. And yeah, thanks, guys. I wish I didn't have to come on this show to talk about it, but I do think it's important to discuss it, because the worst thing that you can do is try and just gloss past it.
Well, I can promise you this, Judd. The next time we have you on a show, it'll be a much more positive and enjoyable topic. But greatly appreciate you coming on, because I think having this conversation, allowing like that to kind of sink in and understand that these guys are humans, and it's just different to handle death in the context of professional football than it is in normal life. And I appreciate you lending your expertise to us.
All right, guys. Thanks much. You take care.
Thanks.
You too, Judd. Thank you everybody for joining us.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community, and we all love our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!